Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Welcome, everyone. Well, Jerry, it's always a good time when we are talking about the power of women. And we have a guest who's, I think this is her third time.
It is. It's her third time. Yes. She's been on LinkedUp the most. And our guest is Kathy Hurley. Yes. But she brought with her today Barbara Kurshan, who also goes by Bobby. So we will call her Bobby. And I couldn't be more excited to talk about the topic that we're going to talk about today. You know, we love to talk about women in leadership. We love to talk about minorities all the time. And they have written a book called InnovateHERS. I love that play on words. And
very clever.
Innovators, InnovateHERS. Yep. And they talk about why purpose-driven entrepreneurial women rise to the top. So we're going to have a great conversation today about the book. And I want to welcome to LinkedUp, Kathy Hurley and Bobby Kurshan. Welcome, ladies. We're so glad to have you here.
So glad to be here.
Yes. Well, let's start out with Kathy Hurley, first of all, knows everyone in ed tech. And I think Bobby is right up there with her. But I want to know how you two ladies connected and decided you needed to write a book, because it was a great idea, whoever came up with this.
Well, Bobby can start. I mean, it's been a great collaboration for sure. And we've known each other for many, many, many years. But why don't you start, Bobby, and then I'll jump in.
As Kathy said, we go way back as friends, as colleagues in the field, and have interestingly connected. And Charles was Kathy's husband, was a big connector for the two of us. I had been working with Charles and Kathy, but and everybody, when they got together, it was part of the connection for everybody. But when we thought about this book, Kathy and I had been talking about what we were going to do. And I had mentioned that I had all this research that I'd been doing for 10 years about the entrepreneurial mindset of innovators and entrepreneurs. And so I told Kathy I didn't want to write another book about an academic book. And I suggested that we work together, since she'd published her other book, she had a network, and that she had told stories in that book. And I really wanted to tell stories in this book. So the collaboration started around our networks. As you said, we both have big networks. And Kathy and I used to joke that when we got poor, we were going to sell our Rolodexes. Nobody knows what a Rolodex is anymore. But anyway, we were. And so that's how we got together. And it's been a great collaboration. And we got to talk to some fascinating women. And we went through our network and came up with a list of over 100 women that we thought should be in the book. And then we kept saying, oh, we'll do 20, then we'll do 25. And we never could cut it back. We kept adding to it. So finally we had to stop and just start writing.
And how many did you end up with?
27.
27. Yes.
27. Now, what are some of the themes that you have throughout? How does that work for these 27?
Well, Bobby can talk about the research. It's a very much a deep research in being an entrepreneur, having the entrepreneurial mindset. So those were the skills that as we interviewed people, as Bobby said earlier, as we interviewed people, we would kind of listen for those words to come up. But again, why don't you talk about that?
Right. We had created, for the research I've been doing at Penn, and it was a 3-phase research study. We totally looked at hundreds of thousands of the data around hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs. We then took that data and narrowed it down to the data from the people that had been entrepreneurs through my programs at Penn. And then we began to look at the data for women. And then we created a self-assessment of your entrepreneurial skills. So we gave each of the people we interviewed this self-assessment. And as Kathy said, we had them look at their skills and what they thought were the most important skills, what were their strengths and what were their weaknesses. And so we were thrilled and fascinated by what we found. And as Kathy said, we then added a questionnaire. Both the questionnaire and the self-assessment are in the back of the book, in the appendices.
Oh,
So you can
nice.
take your own self-assessment of your entrepreneurial skills, and you can look at the questions we asked. And we put together a set of questions that kind of dug into the thinking of what they thought helped them rise to the top. So that's how we used the research. We didn't want to write a research book. We wanted to write stories and journeys, but use the research to drive that.
Before we go into the findings, I just have one question about the title. And it says, why purpose-driven entrepreneurial women? Tell me about purpose-driven. I'm interested in that. How does that play a role in this?
Yeah, that was that probably took the first 6 months of writing this book.
Well, and it's really interesting you're asking that question, because a lot of people haven't, and a lot of thought went into that. A lot of thought.
Yes. What's the thought behind it?
Well, when we started the book, we put together a book proposal. We were going to go out to publishers and find somebody to publish the book. And we thought we were talking about education. And every time we put that in front of a publisher, they would say, that's too narrow, or you're only talking about K through 12, or you're only talking about higher ed. And we realized that the book wasn't about education in the sense of institutional education. It was in the sense of a much broader definition of education. So we tried the word learning, we tried the word education, and we then decided, I began to look at the research, and I realized that what we were looking for was purpose-driven. And of course, that does engage educators, but it looks at the field from social impact, from medical fields, from social justice fields, from social work, from healthcare. And so we found out that purpose-driven was a much broader topic. And when you look at the people we interviewed in the book, while they all had some connection to education, whether they were training ambassadors as one of the people we interviewed in the book, or whether they were working for a big corporation around education, we wanted to get away from just people that were traditionally perceived to be a professor or a teacher. And so purpose-driven came up after lots of conversations, both with the publisher we picked and between Kathy and I, and some research I had begun to look at around purpose-driven organizations.
Well, and I think women have a tendency to be more that purpose-driven. And even when I went to Harvard, even though there was a lot of men and women, the whole point of the program was to say, I've been successful in my career. Now I really want to have some social impact, and I really want to be more purpose-driven. And as you listen to the stories, and it's been really very reaffirming when you talk to people who say, oh my God, I just love the book, because I've learned so much about this whole social impact, because there are people, and women especially, I think, have done really amazing things when it comes to transforming, education. Or when you look at MBA, and we made it global. So you have people from India, or you have people from South America, doing the same things as people are doing here. And the impact has been incredible. And you'll see that kind of woven through the stories.
I like that. And I think it's interesting that it took you that much time and research to kind of make sure that purpose was there, right? But this purpose-driven nature, because that, I guess, ultimately is what you were looking for in an innovator, right? Someone who's leading, because as you described, Kathy, they have this years of experience, and then they're able to funnel that into what they are seeing in the world that is really needed, and then funnel their intentions toward that. And I love that. I love that they're able, that you notice that, you're able to see that, and all of these people have that in common.
Well, we also found that because of COVID, and remember, we started this book before COVID started thinking about the book before COVID set in. As COVID set in, we wove in some of their findings that in the interviews around COVID and what happened and what they changed. But what we did discover was that the number one reason why people want jobs today, they have to and stay in their jobs and don't leave, is because they have to feel it has a purpose. And we find that educators, of course, are in their jobs because they believe in the goal and the mission, whether it's helping children or running a foundation and helping women in India or whatever the purpose is. And as we look today at the great resignation from teachers, we have a shortage of teachers, we're going to have a shortage of nurses. I mean, people went into those fields because they were purpose driven. And as they become more difficult, people are leaving their jobs and they're looking for things that they feel that are purpose driven.
And ultimately they feel valued. They feel valued, right? So I think that's, something that we all need to feel, right? We need to feel valued. And I think when you are working towards something that you're passionate about, that you're making a difference in, that you are, again, intentional and focused, purpose-driven, that kind of leads full circle to fulfill each other. So I think.
And I think many of the books that have come out, we also went through lots of angst about what category this book fell in to. Was it a business book? Was it an entrepreneurship book? Was it a creativity and innovation book? And what we wanted it to be motivational, but we didn't want it to be a self-help book. We had done a lot of research for over 10 years around this field I had with the team that we mentioned in the book at Penn. And we wanted to make sure that the research told the stories, that we didn't just tell stories, that there was based on data that drove the story. So it was all a kind of perfect storm when we kind of got to where we were. We got to the subtitle, we got to the book, we got to the chapters in the book, and what were the themes we wanted to look at.
And Bobby, I was lucky to be in a COSIN event in which you were talking about the book and some of the findings. And I was fascinated with the top things that you found out as you did the research. And I love that you connected the stories to the research. But would you mind sharing some of those findings?
Sure. It's funny because as we begin to talk about the book, we even find more things in the book that support the findings that we had.
I bet you do.
And, even though we wrote it and we knew what we were looking for, we see, when I do speak now, I tend to read excerpts from the book, as I did at the COSIN meeting. So I think the excerpts support the three main themes we found in findings. And this is all based on data. So I love that. Clearly, I'm an academic. One of my hats is an academic. So I look at that.
And that's why we work too well together so well.
Right. Because you're bringing the research to life through the stories.
She is more of the academic side, which is interesting.
So we found three things that I thought was fascinating. One was that women, while all entrepreneurs take risks, women take a more calculated or thoughtful risk. It means that their risk taking is based on data. They do more research, that they look at what the pros and cons are, and they collaborate about that. The second thing we found is that while they have high self-confidence, very high self-confidence, higher than men in the same studies do, to be an entrepreneur, they have a very high imposter syndrome, meaning they don't think they should be at the table. And I'm sure all four of us, on this call as women can relate to that at some point in our career where we felt we were sitting at the wrong table, or that we were trying to achieve higher than we should have. And yet men would never have felt that way. They would have said, oh, I can do that job, even though could do the job. So they had a high imposter syndrome, and they all talked about from their stories about what points in their careers they had that feeling. And then the third thing was, women are, clearly we know this, but the results was interesting, that they're much more, their interpersonal sensitivity is very high. Their empathy scales are much higher than men. And this led to very interesting practical applications. One is they are more collaborative because they're empathetic to everybody that's in the room. They want to include them. If you often look at male leadership, they are not often as good consensus builders as women are around a table. They have better teams that stay with them longer. One of our people we interviewed in the book from India told us that of her 40 top management people that started the company with them, like 95% were still with her. That's an amazing figure, just amazing. And they also, women are able to fire people better because they're more empathetic about what they do and how they do that. You know, they look at it from the person that's sitting across the table from them, and they often couch it in, you know, this isn't the right place for you. You know, you're not happy, you're not achieving, and what can I do to help you move on to the right place for you? And I hear that story over and over again from women entrepreneurs when they're successful. And then the big surprise we found, and this is one that our writer, researcher Laura Smolian found, was that the data showed that they all had a high desire to need to achieve on their scales. However, when you ask them what the attributes were that made them successful, none of them picked need to achieve. They all picked passion, they all picked, you know, other factors. And we found that fascinating because most of the women in the book were often the firstborn in their family. They were often came from homes where they had to come up, they were first to go to college. They lived, you know, we have stories of people living in trailer camps and communes and, you know, and having to, and then their parents dying very young. And one of our people in the book had to basically take care of herself and grow herself up and get her to college and then ultimately get her to an MBA. And her mother had taken her to live in a commune in Hawaii. So, I mean, we have fascinating stories about this need to achieve. So those are some of the things we found, and probably a good segue at this point is we also found that mentorship was really important to all these women. And Kathy, you know, that was part of the book that she spent a lot of time on because she's so good at it. So I'm going to let Kathy talk about the findings around mentorship.
Yes, Kathy is our resident expert in mentorship. We've had her on a couple times on the podcast. So
and she mentors so many women and pushes them up. I love that about you, Kathy.
Well, thank you. But, you know, but before I get into the mentorship, I just really want to mention some of the things that Bobby said is that I think that's why the book is so, men are attracted to the book as well as women. And I've had a lot of men come up after reading it, say, I want to share this with my daughter. I want to have my wife read this, because these are the things that I think we all kind of aspire to, that we really need to have, not to only to be leaders, but to be entrepreneurs. So I think, you know, that was really interesting. One of the things that Bobby did not mention, and she mentioned all of these really, you know, great ideas, is that the thing that surprised us also was that in the book that I did on leadership, most of the women said their fathers were the reason they were the leader that they were. In this book, it was totally different. It was mothers. We'd say, who is the person in your family that was responsible for you being an entrepreneur? And the majority of people said, my mother, because she could work, she could do the PTA, she could do volunteering, she could do the sports thing, driving everybody around. She could multitask. And I think that was kind of a surprise to us.
So mothers are entrepreneurial and others were more leadership.
Yep.
Well, they're also seeing, right, just like you said, their mother being that multitasker and be able to, you know, take things on that sometimes fathers fall apart.
Well, and you know, the other thing that really was interesting, and I'm not going to say which two women, but two of the women that are in the book said to me, they didn't have a particularly close relationship with their mother, but the more they thought about it, the more they really never gave their mother credit for being the person that really drove them to be who they were, which is kind of a really interesting thing that people are kind of looking at themselves as they're reading this book, or, you know, so that was kind of interesting.
That, along with that, just to expand upon it, we also found that women that were from families that the mother never really had a job outside of the house, and they weren't from particularly wealthy families. They were also had large families in many cases, you know, multiple brothers and sisters. They still saw their mother as the entrepreneurial one because they could make survival happen if they had homes where there was, either not a father or an alcoholic or some other problem in the family, they still saw their mother as an entrepreneur. It was very interesting,
Yeah.
fascinating work.
Well, mentorship has been a really interesting part of this because everyone at one point or another did talk about people who mentored them. And of course, Bobby and I get a chuckle out of, when we say we had a lot of men who mentored us because there were not a lot of women in the industry when we were going in the 70s and, the early 80s kind of going through. So you really wanted to get any kind of mentor that you could. And I had some unbelievable, fabulous male mentors. Now, that said, I have to say one of the people that's been most impactful in my life was a woman. And that was a woman who was the CEO of Pearson, who I just learned so much from. But I do think that people think from an early age, like Bobby said, you're the oldest in your family. What are you going to do? You're going to try to be a leader. You're going to try to mentor your siblings. Then you go on to high school, you go on to college, and you find people that you know and you like, and you think, oh, I'd like to learn from that person. And one of the things that I say that really didn't come out in the book very much is that you think about people you work for being your mentors. There were people who worked for me that I learned so much from. And it was such a joy to have people that worked for me. We had a great relationship that I could learn from them as much as they could learn from me. So, I'm pretty open to saying we are surrounded by mentors everywhere in our lives. And let's take advantage of, networking, my mantra, network. But I think let's take advantage of going with different groups, and we don't always have to be with the same people. Let's take advantage going to a meeting new people, because inevitably you're going to meet someone say, I like what they just said, or I really like it. I mean, and Bobby's a good example. I learn from Bobby every time that she speaks. And I mean, it's just a joy to have friends that that you can be learning from, all the time. So mentoring is, I think, critical. I think there's some things that you need to learn to be a good mentor and to be mentored. I mean, I don't think it's easy. People say, oh yeah, would you mentor me? Well, no, what does that mean? Because to really mentor someone, you have to take time.
And there's a
to mentor
relationship that has to
someone.
be built, right?
Right. And you have to know that person's going to take the good and the bad. They're going to be able to, take things that you don't think they're doing really well, that they could be doing better. And that's not always easy for people. So, and you have to be able to give. I mean, I know friends who said, well, I'm not going to share my contacts, or I'm not going to share. Well, it's all about sharing. If you're going to be a really good mentor, you're going to teach people how to become the person that you are. So you have to share and you have to trust. So I think these are all things that we learned again through the stories. I agree with what Bobby said. I keep the book right on my table. And if I have a minute, I'll go through and I'll read it again, because every time you read these stories, you pick up something else. And like I said, because it's global, and we spent a lot of time looking at making sure we had someone from every continent. But, these people are doing, they're just like us, and we're all the same, and it's really interesting as you go back and read these stories.
Well, I think that, and you consciously made that decision to not do a self-help book, but instead tell these, express your research through these stories. And I think that is really important, because just like you said, Kathy, people are going to pick it up, and even you as the author, and come to a different realization each time. It allows people to make connections much better. Instead of spoon feeding, right? They're going to be taking from it different things that relate to them, and at different points in their lives, they're going to be able
We
to.
also, if you read the book, you'll notice in the chapters, the middle chapters, where we talk about the 4 passion and need to achieve and things like that. We are at the end of each of the stories, we in the book chapters, we give 2 or 3 bullets about what the essence of that learnings were, but it's not self-help. However, the chapter on mentorship, which we wrote slightly different than the others because we felt it is much more of what, as Kathy said, the trust, the sharing, the collaboration, that's highly pointed out in the book with what to do to mentor. It was the only chapter we felt that we needed to give more instruction in the sense of a guide than we did in the other chapters or the stories. And Kathy tells her story woven into that chapter. I tell my story woven into the beginning of the book about why we wanted to do it and how I kind of come to the place. So it's great bookend, to the book in general. But I think one of the things Kathy said that's so important is this trust thing, and to create groups of women that you trust and that you can share with. And Kathy and I are members of a group. We work with lots of friends and groups, but we have one particular group that we've always laughed because even though we worked at competitive organizations, we would share information, which we felt not anything that we couldn't disclose, but we would share information about things that we thought would help the other person and that we would make introductions. And we didn't see it as competitive. We saw it as collaborative. And I think that you have to have that trust factor with any person that you're working with that you want to mentor.
And the trust is so important because as a mentor, sometimes if you're really a loving mentor, you will deliver some tough news to people to help them grow. And it's really out of love that you do that. And you hope that it comes off that way. But that trust has to be there first before you can do that, deliver that message to them.
One of the entrepreneurs that I've mentored for years now, he would tell other entrepreneurs that wanted to speak with me that, about tough news. She said, Bobby's going to tell it to you like it is. But if she's still speaking to you after 5 minutes, then she's interested. It may not be that way, but
Yes.
she's interested. So it is important for people to give tough news in a way that feels empathetic and supports them and shows them what they're doing. But I've said to numerous entrepreneurs, I said, this doesn't seem to make you happy. You sure you want to continue this organization? It's hard to say you failed or that you should be doing something else. And so many entrepreneurs don't know when to pull the plug or when to move on or when to pivot. And I think as a mentor, as you said, you have to deliver tough news to these people, or they're going to go on. And finally, after several years, an entrepreneur I'd mentored for years came to me and said, I'm going to close the business, Bobby. I should have done it sooner, but your advice was right. And now she's very happy. She's in a position that she likes. She still wants to do something in the field she was doing it, but she's doing something else right now till she comes back and figures out what make her successful as an entrepreneur.
You mentioned that when you did your research, you found that the subjects of your book, or anyone from the research really, identified sometimes their mother, even though they did not perhaps start a business. Is there a variety of different entrepreneurship that is exemplified in here? Or are they typically business owners? What is that definition of entrepreneurship?
Remember, we're looking at entrepreneurial mindset in the book. We're not looking at entrepreneurs, and we make that very clear. So they come from working in corporations, running foundations, working for the government. We have people across the board because we think you can be entrepreneurial. And by the way, that's what's in the subtitle of the book, not entrepreneurs. We think you can be entrepreneurial, whether it's intrapreneurial or whether in an organization that is not something you started.
Right on that. We tried to get different age groups. I mean, if you really look at it, we brought up the diversity, certainly people around the world, but we looked at the different age groups and the nonprofit and the profit and people who are smaller companies, larger companies. So it was tricky, but I think we got a lot of, good examples.
When Kathy and I would go back and forth on a woman on the list, and we'd say, gosh, we'd love to have her in the book, but we already have too many people from India, or we don't have enough diversity. And so a lot of the people that we put in the book, we wanted to put in the book, we didn't, not because we didn't think they were doing great things. We also looked carefully at the list to make sure that they were from diverse organizations. So, Sherry Weston, who's the CEO of Sesame, is in the book. And we have a woman who was the chief of protocol for the Ambassador Trudeau, for Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada. And one of her jobs over the years was to train new ambassadors going out to the other countries around the world. And she talks a lot about the change and how she was able to adapt, because every place she went was something she had to change for. So that was a great entrepreneurial skill.
It sounds to me like there's a book 2 in here somehow.
What I was thinking. Yes.
Well, and the other thing about the book, I think, is there's really good resources. We have a website now, and we're going to keep that going with adding new resources, because, as you know, that changes all the time. And we have the bios of all the women. Like Bobby said, we have the entrepreneurial mindset characteristics and the assessment in the book. So there's a lot of really good things, even beside the stories.
Well, it also sounds like there is a really good opportunity for some great book clubs and PLNs that can be developed based on this as well, because I can see, further collaboration around these topics. So that might be something we can do, Jerry.
Yes, website ability to share your story. So anybody can come on our website, and we'll start posting other people's stories. So, and we're going to collaborate with organizations that have women on their website and see if we can share the stories that come to our website across other websites. So we're really interested in other people's stories. We could have listened to stories all day. We were lucky to get these women to give us an hour of their time and then follow up with them. As you can imagine, it's like herding cats to get 27 busy women to schedule an interview, approve their stories, approve their bios. So we really do want other people to share in a more open, transparent way.
That's perfect.
Speaking of busy women, when did the book debut? And tell us how busy you've been since it debuted, and how's it doing?
Well, the book officially launched on April 21st. And so you can order it on Amazon or Barron's, Barron's or Book Club and other places. Right now, if you go to Amazon and you want to get the Kindle edition, it's free if you're a Prime member. So you can get
Nice.
the book free.
Yes.
So, and that will be for a short period of time. You can also, we launched it thanks to ClassLink. We launched it at the first meeting we went to was GSV, and ClassLink supported it. And we did a pre-release there, and then a pre-release at COSIN also. So
yes, and you've been on many shows since then. You've been talking to people and asked to speak about the book, and I hear the book is doing very well.
It has been. It's only been out for 2 weeks officially, but we're getting a lot of orders and a lot of press. University of Pennsylvania's bookstore called the other day and told me that they'd already ordered it, and that they wanted me to come in and sign books so they could put it in the window at the bookstore. So,
and we've gotten calls from companies. I just got a call from a company. They ordered 100 books, and they're going to give it out to all of their people within their company. So, and but the book club idea is good. And I've even had friends who have said, gee, that might be really good for our book club. And I'm like, yeah, great. So that really wasn't something we had thought about, in the beginning, but I'm going to an event at our country club tomorrow night, and they have a book club. So I'm going to say to them, if you want a book, we might want to use this one.
And we do have now, about the new website Book Club, and we're also going to be putting a book club on there. So, and running that, making it available to people to create book clubs about that. So yes, it's a great book club conversation. A lot of people have said they're going to give it to their daughters for graduations and for gifts. So we're excited about so far. It's hard to, as you know, in the publishing industry today, publishers don't market your books for you unless you happen to be Michelle Obama or somebody in that category. But we've had a great, we've been marketing all over social media, and it does pay off.
Yes. Bobby, you said something about a website called Book Club. I want to back up just a little bit. What
There's
is
a
that?
new website started by David Blake, who was one of the people behind Degreed, which is a company that you could go on and aggregate degree. He started a new website. It's called bookclub.com, and you can go on and create virtual book clubs and around a book.
Oh, what a great idea.
Mhm.
Yes. So we will have in the show notes where they can find your book. I also like, if you're in a book club, you could find out about yourself and be a little introspective by taking the quizzes that you have here and finding out a little more about yourself as well as others. I think that's a gift in and of itself to have that in your book as well. But as we begin to land this plane, we always like to ask our guests, what has become clear through collaborating together and writing this book? What's become clear to you?
I think what's become clear to me is two things. One, that women are truly innovators, whether they run a company or a business or whether they're just starting out in their career. And the second thing that's been come clear to me, and I've written lots of academic books. I mean, this is not my first book. I've written probably 20 books that, in the areas of computer science, instructional design, computer literacy. And this was the first sort of book I said I really wanted to write a trade book, not an academic book. And what became clear to me is that you have to depend on the people around that you surround yourself with, the team and what they bring to the table, and keep reminding yourself, because we all can't do everything. And it wasn't at times when you work with any team, it was a difficult process, took longer than we thought. And I don't think COVID was, our friend in some ways. But on the other hand, you learn that if you're really, truly committed to it, and committed to the people that you work with, those are minor issues along the way. So I think for Kathy and I, it's been a journey of friendship as well as learning.
Sure. Anything to add to that, Kathy?
Yeah, and I think for me, it's interesting as I read the reviews of the book, and we sent it out to, again, a variety of people, and you'll see the reviews on the website as well as on the book covers. The way they position what they learned and this whole purpose driven, I feel that I have become more purpose driven by doing this book and by hearing other people's stories, because it's such a wonderful thing to know that there is a purpose for why you're doing work and you want to be part of it. And you see companies doing more of that. And it's great. And I try to congratulate companies as I see them doing more, social impact, purpose-driven work. So it's become kind of top of mind for me. And it really wasn't always top of mind.
Those are great reflections. Well, thank you, ladies, both for being here today. I know you have busy, busy schedules, and a lot of people are talking to you about your book, but we are so happy to have had you on the podcast and to hear in detail what the book's about. And we're so excited to dig in and read and find out. And I'm thinking this is a book I can pick up and read a chapter and lay it down and then pick it up at another time and read a chapter. I like that too, because sometimes we just need to chunk and chew through things because we are busy.
Well, you
So
can just read a story or two every night, and you
right.
don't have to read them in any order. The stories stand on their own.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting my copy. We're also going to be giving one away through a giveaway on social media as well. And I do look forward to giving this to both of my daughters. One of them is in the fashion world, and the other one is getting into industrial design at Georgia Tech, where there is a very large percentage of men versus women there. So I think you mentioned the imposter syndrome that is something that's kind of on her mind a little bit, and I think this is going to be so wonderful for her and any graduate. Actually, perfect timing.
Yes, it is perfect timing.
Well, I just want to say that you, Jamie and Jerry, you are really epitome of being entrepreneurs, and I think as you talk to people, you're sharing all of this great wealth of information, what you're doing with LinkedIn, LinkedUp. So congratulations for taking, I don't know how easy it was. I think Burge is pretty easy to work with to say, I have an idea, we want to move this ahead, but I think you're doing just an incredible job. So keep up the great work.
You hit an idea with me that I hadn't thought about. Jamie and I are very purpose driven in what we do on this podcast.
Yeah.
We are very intentional about finding people who maybe were not listening to their stories. And we also try to find a very diverse group of people that can push others forward. So, Jamie, I'd never thought about how purpose driven we both are about this podcast.
It's very true. It is
Well,
very true.
some of the people in the book, there are some very interesting people in the book. And in Zoom, it's so easy to do, internationally, I'm thinking of somebody like in Ecuador, Anna, young, smart, really doing some great things in education. So if you look through and look at the bios, you'll see some people, and feel free
Potential guests.
Call them or get a couple people on.
Yes.
That would be great.
What a great idea. I think we'll do that. I'm pretty sure we will. Yes.
Thank you for all your support at ClassLink. And this has been fun.
It has been fun, and it's been our pleasure to get to visit with you both today. Thank you so much.
Our pleasure. And don't forget to catch Kathy's other podcast that we just did a couple months ago on mentorship, if you want a little bit more about all of her expertise and advice when it comes to mentorship.
I got a cute note from my niece who listened to it. I mean, this is someone who I know you've met my niece, she goes, I can't believe I listened to this. I learned so much stuff. I said, see, even in your own family, you have people who can be helpful.
We do have it on our website, the link to it. So it's there for anybody that goes to the resources page. We've linked that podcast on our website.
Oh, good.
And now you'll link this one.
Right. We will as soon as it's available. And it's our website is InnovateHERS.org.
And we'll be checking it out now.
Okay.
So I won't see you at ISTE, but come to Asbury Park anytime. I'll be up there second week in June.
All right. We look forward to it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you both.
Take care. It's been great.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify and subscribe to us on YouTube.